What's up, guys, and welcome to another video. Now, you do know that this channel is focused on me learning Japanese, but if you know anything about me, you know that I also learned Esperanto a year or so ago, and I wanted to do kind of a reaction video. This is from Language Tsar, or Conor. He made a video about 7 months ago called Why I Will Never Learn Esperanto, and I never really focused too much on these because I fully understand why somebody wouldn't, but I just want to see kind of the points he makes and things like that. And I'm going to also try, I know a lot of people when they watch this, especially that know Esperanto, are super negative towards people because the negativity shown towards the Esperanto community is generally, why would I learn that? It's stupid. But then the Esperanto community kind of acts childish back a lot of times, like, you're an idiot, you didn't research. So I just kind of want to be a neutral party and kind of see what he said. It's a almost 8-minute video. And before I start, I love Conor. I think he does fantastic content, fantastic language learner. That's just kind of right out of the gate. So anyway, let's and I will link the video down below. I don't have monetization on this or anything like that. I don't get paid for it. So this is just fair use and all that stuff. But let's get into it and see what he says.
Cuvi parolas Esperanto?
Esperanto? Hell no! Why would I speak Esperanto, man?
Okay. Making like a skit out of it or something.
Preparing his speech for an international conference in Geneva in 1906, Zamenhof described the events in his hometown of Białystok. Savages with axes and iron stakes have flung themselves, like the fiercest beasts, against the quiet villagers. They smashed the skulls and poked out the eyes of men and women, of broken men and helpless infants. At the next conference after that in Cambridge in 1907, he said flatly that Esperanto would become a school for future brotherly humanity. So there's always been a political project behind Esperanto, but it is hard to say if modern Esperantists really adhere to these original principles, as they tend to be split into subgroups based on their own preferences. So you're probably asking yourself, if you're unfamiliar with Esperanto, well, what is Esperanto? Esperanto is the most successful and widely spoken conlang, or constructed language, in the world, and it all started here in this city, which lies in modern-day Poland, which is Białystok. The creator of Esperanto, Ludwig Zamenhof, was born here when it was part of the Russian Empire, and at that time in his childhood, the city was multilingual and multi-ethnic, so there was a lot of Yiddish spoken by Jews, predominantly, of course, German, Russian, Polish, Belarusian, and many other languages here amongst the different groups in the city. And Zamenhof, this left a big impression on Zamenhof, and he believed that the animosity between the different groups was caused by the fact that they spoke different language, at least in large part. And he was set about in 1873 creating a new language called Esperanto, that he believed would become a universal language, not just here in Białystok, but actually across the globe. And Zamenhof himself was actually a polyglot. He spoke lots and lots of different languages, not just Yiddish, German, Russian, Polish, but also Romance languages like French, Latin. So he had a wide array of languages. He also came into contact with Lithuanian, apparently. So he had this kind of mix, and that actually left a big impression on Esperanto itself and the way that it was designed, because he used a lot of the influence of the languages around him in Europe to create the language, which goes to a point of whether Esperanto at the end of the day is actually really a neutral language, because it is predominantly Indo-European.
That's so far, you know, everything he's saying seems pretty accurate. Esperanto is derived a lot from specifically Spanish, and there are a lot of English-like words in there. I don't necessarily think, this is just my own personal opinion, the idea of it being the world language isn't necessarily that it is, it takes something from every single different language that has ever existed, as much as making the easiest possible language on the planet to learn, which I guess I could see what he's saying here, because someone who speaks Japanese, it's not going to be easier for them to learn it if it's derived a lot from Romance languages. So I get what he's saying so far.
So of course, reducing interethnic or intergroup violence and conflict sounds fantastic, doesn't it? But unfortunately, the statistical evidence just doesn't add up that having a common language is actually a good indicator in terms of, and predictor in terms of reducing intergroup or interethnic violence. You just have to look at other bloody conflicts in Europe where people actually had a common language. For example, the former Yugoslavia in the 90s, or Northern Ireland, of course, over 30 years. And unfortunately, that just doesn't hold up when we look at the numbers. So one of the main reasons for creating Esperanto as a common language and as a constructed language to reduce interethnic conflict here in Białystok, that was Zamenhof's idea. It's just a myth. It doesn't work in reality, unfortunately.
So another city that L.L. Zamenhof lived in was Grodno, which lies today in modern Belarus. One of the things that of course motivates me to learn languages is if you actually know lots of people, especially if you actually have a romantic partner. Either you're married to someone, you have a long-term partner, or just that you have a girlfriend from a country where the language is spoken that you're trying to learn, or that you actually get motivated to learn the language because you met someone who speaks it and you want to get to know their culture better, which is obviously important if you're having a long-term relationship with someone. I definitely advise that. Now, Esperanto. I have actually never dated anyone who speaks Esperanto, which for normal people would be like, duh, there aren't that many people who speak Esperanto, but actually at the language conferences that I go to, there are quite a large number of Esperantists at times. But nothing romantic has ever happened personally to me. Esperantos ladies, let me know, write me if you want to convince me to learn Esperanto.
So, I get what he's saying there. But the idea is, especially for him, if he's a polyglot, I'm sure he doesn't have a girlfriend that speaks one of the, 11 or 12 languages that he currently knows. You know what I mean? Like, and as far as people speaking it, I've personally, in my experience, the Esperanto community is more apt to talk to you. This is just my personal experience. The Esperanto community is more apt to talk to you because they're excited about it. When I join a group, like when I was learning Spanish, it was like pulling teeth to try and find someone to speak with because no one really cared, because it's like, well, I speak Spanish, I don't care if you do or not, whatever. Esperanto, as soon as I joined a group and I was like, hey, I know Esperanto, it was friend requests and message requests, like, hey, let's talk, let's chat, let's practice. And it kind of built a community or like a camaraderie around it. And in my experience, I've had more conversations in Esperanto than I have in any language that I've ever tried to learn. And it's just because the community is so much more receptive to it. Now, this doesn't go for everything. Honestly, Vietnamese is probably up there. Vietnamese people want to speak so bad. Like, when I was learning Vietnamese a little bit, I would get messages all the time. Honestly, that's about the only language I would compare to Esperanto as far as that. They're just excited to learn and they want to help. They want to learn English and teach you Vietnamese. But anyway, so yeah, and there's a guy that I know, one of my really good friends I met via Esperanto, and I try to talk to him regularly. And there's a ton of people that speak it, and they're more willing to speak to you because of the excitement that, hey, somebody else knows this. It's kind of like, I don't know if sports would be a good reference, but if you find somebody who likes your team, you see somebody wearing a jersey it's almost like an instant bond type of thing. Or if somebody likes the same music or same movie or whatever, and it's kind of like that. So I don't know. I don't necessarily know what he's saying there because, again, him being a polyglot, if he's saying romance is one of the big things, and I fully get that. Trust me, I get it. But I know that he probably isn't currently dating someone who speaks the billion languages that he speaks. You know what I mean? Anyway, let's try to finish up this video here.
So, Zamenhof himself had a vision of Esperanto to become kind of like a universal global lingua franca, and that simply has just, first of all, not happened. The number of people speaking Esperanto or any conlang, even if it's the most widely spoken one, are just a fraction of the world's population.
Pausing it here, not to cut him off, but part of the reason is because the polyglot community is so negative towards it, and when the popular language learners completely disregard it, people tend to follow what they're saying. People will listen to people like that. I think Benny might be the only the only polyglot that I know that's kind of pro Esperanto. But anyway, like big name polyglot. I could be mistaken. You can let me know down below. But yeah, it's when it's discredited by so many people who are learning languages, of course it's going to struggle to pick up. Now, you could argue that why isn't it picked up in a long time, blah, 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 and I get that. It should have picked up where it is. But with the rise of the internet, there's been an absolute boom in Esperanto, and you're talking several million people speak it versus it almost died during the war. So anyway, let's continue.
Population, and there are several other regional lingua francas, like in Latin America, Spanish is effectively a lingua franca, or French in a lot of Africa, and Russian in this region. As everyone knows, the global language today is English.
If we're saying that Spanish is the lingua franca of Spain, then yeah, I mean, you could say English is of America, like Spain, I'm sorry, of Latin America and South America, because, well, anyway, I mean, Brazil speaks Portuguese, but just about everybody everywhere else speaks Spanish down there, so that's kind of a weird point. That may be a stupid point on my part, but that's just me thinking out loud.
So English is achieved without the need to actually create the language just for that purpose. In effect, it is becoming a global lingua franca. One could say it already is.
Also, English is way, way harder to learn than Esperanto, just because of how we use words. So much of what we say is in slang, and then words that are spelled the same, but are pronounced differently. There's a lot. English is super, super hard. People who speak English struggle speaking English. I'm sure in this video you could dissect it, and I would say several things incorrectly, and that's perfectly fine. So, anyway.
I had a video that I made with Steve Kaufman, who is known as Lingo Steve on YouTube, a huge doyan in the field of language learning. Love Steve's content over the last decade here on YouTube. And we made a video about how language is the fourth dimension of travel, because it really adds something in terms of communicating with people and having access to the culture and just giving it more of a pleasurable experience when you're traveling. At least for us, that's our take on it. And that's something that you just can't get with Esperanto, because it's not like for example, you learn Spanish maybe because you want to go to Cuba, you know, dance salsa, eat Cuban food, and that's going to be an integral part of going there. Is also maybe even going to take a Spanish course in Havana in Cuba in order to do that. But you're just not going to do that with Esperanto. Now, I know they organize, of course, Esperanto events, and you can go there, but that's not the same thing in terms of travel.
I think one of the biggest misinterpretations from polyglots to Esperanto is that, where are you going to speak it? Well, first and foremost, where am I going to speak any language? I'm not going to speak Japanese here in Bluefield, Virginia. I'm going to speak it online and over Skype and stuff. The other thing with Esperanto is 99% of the reason, almost 100% of the reason I learned it wasn't necessarily because I wanted to go places and speak Esperanto, because I understand the limitability of that. It was that it helped me understand how to learn a language. It helped me understand what my strengths were and how I learned properly. And it also got me thinking in another language, and it allowed me to become more, it allowed me to become better at learning languages and retaining information. Really and truly, the language itself, you know, outside of culture, which, you know, whatever, and you can make a whole video on Esperanto culture, and that's not what I'm arguing here. But what I'm saying is the language itself, from where it is so easy to learn, can help you understand how to learn a language. Because in my opinion, one of the biggest things with learning a language isn't necessarily your ability to retain information, it's learning how to learn a language.
So, if you enjoyed this video, big thumbs up. If you didn't enjoy it, probably you're giving it a thumbs down, but that's fine. Make sure that you comment in any case whether you speak Esperanto, plan to learn it, love the concept, love the idea, love the values of Esperanto, or you think it's a complete waste of time, it's utter folly, and we should just abandon the whole idea of a language like Esperanto. Let me know all that good stuff below in the comment section below the video. And normally I sign off my videos with normally the language I'm talking about, but since Esperanto is not a language I'm planning to learn, and I think it would be inappropriate for me to sign off in Esperanto. Also, it doesn't have a homeland, and I'm here in Grodno in Belarus. So I'm going to sign off in one of the two official languages of Belarus, which of course is Russian, and that is До свидания, and I will see you guys in the next video. If you're not a subscriber.
Okay, that seems like it's about it. Overall, I don't hate the video. I think Conor did a really, really good job at portraying properly what he was trying to say. He was not negative about it at all, I didn't think. He brought some very, very valid points, I think, but I think, again, the target was missed. You know, I want to learn Japanese, and it's because I love watching wrestling, I love watching Japanese movies and stuff like that. I will travel. If I go to Japan, it'll probably be less than 5 times in my lifetime. So you don't necessarily always learn a language. Now, if you're a professional language learner and you get paid to write blogs and stuff like that, that's one thing. But if you're just a normal person, probably a large percentage of why you're learning a language isn't necessarily because you want to go to the area. So if we can put that onto Esperanto, where there's not an area where you can go, even though there's like Esperanto cafes and stuff all around the world, just learn it. Or don't learn it. I don't really care. If you want to learn it, learn it. If not, don't. Whatever. That's not the argument here. What I'm saying is, you can't. To me, I don't think that you can say it's pointless to learn because you can't speak it anywhere, because you can speak it same place as you can speak every other language, which is on the internet. So that's my argument against that. Again, I think Conor, that was a fantastic video. I thought it was at least seemed like it was well researched, and he didn't come off as negative as just saying you're an idiot for learning it. He was just saying this is why I don't learn it, and I thought that he made very, very valid points. So I am going to end the video here. If you let me know down below what you think. Do you think it's pointless to learn? Do you not? I personally, I speak it. It helped me learn how to learn languages, and it's forever useful to me for that. And I still, to this day, probably speak more Esperanto than I do any other language except for English, obviously. So, but with that, guys, I am going to end the video here. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you guys in the next video.